Number 1. I recently drove from Philadelphia, PA to Buffalo, New York with my cat. The ride was long, but we were making decent time for the most part. She and I had gotten up toward right before you got into New York. It was around 5:30 p.m., but that also meant it was around pitch black out too. We had only stopped once to get something at McDonald's, and I drank their iced tea quickly to try to stay awake. I definitely had to pee. I didn't want to leave my cat in the car, so I put her leash on, and we walked into the gas station. I said, "Do you mind if we use the restroom here?" The man behind the counter said, "Sure." The store wasn't empty. There were some dudes around browsing for honey buns, tasty cakes, and cheaper cigarettes than those in New York. There was a woman talking to the counter guy up front. She was probably like a regular based on their seemingly familiarity with each other. My cat and I entered into the bathroom. She sat on the counter while I did my thing. My cat suddenly jumped about a foot when we heard the doorknob rattle. I laughed and said, "Sorry, it's occupied right now." My cat is a trained animal. She is trained to handle people, stimulating situations, crowds, and relatively loud noise. She hates cars, though. I looked over at her after the jump, and her tail was as full as could be, and she got low and slipped up to her favorite position on my shoulders. She dug into my hair with her nails and did her little grumble at me that she does when she wants to be let outside. The doorknob rattled again, and she reached out toward the door, like in a quick way, like a strike. "It's still occupied," I called out, but I wasn't laughing this time. We then heard someone speak. It was a man's voice, and honestly, it kind of made my blood run cold. They were speaking a cousin of my native language. English is not my first. They were saying,
"Should I grab her when she comes out?"
And in my native tongue, grab doesn't really have the multiple connotations like it does in English. Let me grab them before they go. I have to ask them something. Grab a bite to eat. Grabbed by the hair, etc. They used what was similar to take, as far as I could tell through the door.
"No, the cashier is right there."
We can go stand outside. I think her car is the blue one.
My cat did her angry grumble bug sound, and I tried to pet her to reassure her. There weren't any windows in this bathroom, and my car was parked, unwisely, around the side of the lot. I parked it a little away from the lights because I had a lot of stuff in it, and I didn't want the items to be lit. It was not the blue one. We heard their steps retreat, and we sat there for what felt like a long time. We both jumped when we heard a knock on the door.
"Come out quickly, and my girlfriend will lead you through the back to your car. They are standing out by the pumps."
It was the counter guy, and whom I thought was the regular. I opened the door and she ushered me to the back. Not smart, but like I didn't know what else to do. She opened the door and I could see my car about 20 feet away. I wanted to sprint, but I remembered I used my key thing to set the alarm. I unlocked the car with my keys and the alarm went off. I have deep cuts from my cat from this. Sorry, madam. I threw myself into the driver's seat, unlocked it with the key thing, and quickly pressed the button to lock it again. I felt my heart in my throat as I threw the car into reverse and got out of there. On my way out, I noticed the guy standing near the blue car on the other side of the lot, trying to nonchalantly smoke. They didn't even know I got out. Number 2. Growing up in a particularly run-down part of Cleveland, Ohio, offers people the chance to learn some very valuable lessons. At the time this happened, I was about 14 years old and graduating the 8th grade at a local elementary school. The nearest gas station to my house is a Speedway, and after school, me and my friend Amy would walk to the Speedway to buy drinks and stuff while we were hanging out. I met Amy at the bottom of her driveway. We greeted each other and walked side by side, talking about what went on that day. After a few minutes, we arrived at the speedway and walked in. It was only me, Amy, and one cashier who was in the back the whole time. Amy grabbed her signature Starbucks mocha thingy while I went and just grabbed a Pepsi. We were waiting in line, and I, out of boredom, looked out of the window to my left. There was a tall, skinny man eyeing me up and down from one of the gas pumps about 20 feet away from me. He was wearing a black Miami Heat jersey on top of a gray hoodie, blue shorts, and no shoes. The more I stared at him, I noticed he was smiling this insane-looking smile. It looked almost painful. After a few moments of staring, he turned around and left. "Amy," I said to her behind me, "did you see that guy?" I turned around to see her looking at me surprised.
No, why?
I just decided to end the conversation with a never mind and pay. We had paid and we were heading home when out of the corner of my eye, I saw the man. He was still smiling. Amy must have noticed because she turned and saw him too.
Is that him?
"Yeah," I choked out nervously. What he did next is something that still chills me to this day. He began to walk towards us until he was 5 feet away from us. I instinctively took Amy's hand, hoping that she would pick up on the situation, as she thought it was a joke. Thankfully, she did. After a few minutes of silence, he grabbed Amy's arm and yanked her away from me. I, going on adrenaline and instinct, yanked her away from the man and ran with her. She had begun running next to me. We stopped in our tracks when we heard someone sobbing. We turned to face him and saw he was still smiling, but sobbing as he smiled and looked directly at us.
Amy, please don't go. I love you.
We began to run again, and soon after heard him following closely behind us. Until after what seemed like forever, we had stumbled upon a cop and his partner. The man was arrested on the spot. Upon being searched, the police found that the man had a knife and rope on him. The police called another car, and they took us to her house, where once inside, she broke down and cried. Having somehow kept our drinks, I told her to drink hers and calm down. I also agreed to stay with her that night. I'm going to put a trigger warning on this story. If you've ever been abducted or almost abducted, it may be unsettling, so viewer discretion advised. Thank you. Number 3. I'm a 27-year-old female, and this happened when I was 24. I lived in Los Angeles and have for my entire life. I was feeling lonely and so decided to go onto Craigslist. I know, I'm dumb. To try and find someone to hang out with, not necessarily a date, but just someone to chill with. If it led to somewhere, then so be it. That was my thinking. I emailed with a few guys, one of which stood out to me. He sent some pics, and I was fine with how he looked, and he seemed nice enough. We agreed to meet and go have coffee. It took him a lot longer than he said it would to get there, and once he did arrive, I instantly regretted what I was doing. But, being overly polite and feeling awkward, I went along. I got in his car, and instead of heading to Starbucks as planned, he drove to a CVS. I was like, what are we doing here? To which he just said he had to return some stuff to CVS so that he would have some money. I was super uncomfortable already and just wanted to get out of there, but again, my shyness got the better of me, and I just waited it out. Once he returned whatever it was he was returning, he then said he had to stop by his apartment. We pulled into his underground garage, and he said he'd
be right back.
You don't know how badly I wish I had run right then while he was gone, but I didn't. He got back in the car, and I could tell right away that he was high on an upper, Probably meth. Having been to rehab before myself, it was blatantly obvious. I told him I'd gotten an emergency phone call while he was upstairs and that I was sorry, but I had to be taken back. I told him he could just drop me off at the nearest train station. I lived in a city like an hour away, so I wasn't about to have him drive me all the way home. We got on the freeway. That was the fastest route to the train stop, but we ended up passing the exit. I told him a few miles ahead of time which one it was, but he didn't say anything, seemingly ignoring me. I thought maybe he just hadn't heard me. "Hey, that was the exit actually. You passed it," I said. Instead of pulling over to the right lanes, he kept pulling farther and farther over to the left until we were all the way in the far left-hand lane. I asked him what he was doing, trying to keep my cool. I can't honestly remember his exact words, but it was something along the lines of,
"I'm not dropping you off. We're having sex. Why do you think I did this?"
I looked at him with my jaw to the ground and asked him, "So you're refusing to drop me off?" He said yes and sped up the car. The first thing I thought of was obviously calling the police, so I pulled my cell out. He turned towards me and he hit me in the face, hard, and I dropped my phone because I was so shocked. The phone had fallen somewhere below his seat, somewhere I couldn't get to. I was panicking. As we continued to drive, and I tried desperately to think of what I should do, we came up on another interstate, the 5. For some reason, seeing the freeways intersect and seeing that we were about to get on yet another freeway was hugely ominous to me, and I decided I could not let him get on the next freeway. I couldn't jump out of the car. I'd die instantly, so I did the only other thing I could think of. I took a breath and grabbed the steering wheel, turning it as hard as I could to the right. He was so shocked, he didn't even try to grab it back from me as we crashed into one, then another car, and crashed into the side barrier. He turned towards me again and started hitting me while screaming,
"You bitch! You stupid bitch! You screwed everything up!"
I put my legs up to block the blows from his fists, and it worked. I ended up falling backwards out of the car after managing to put my hand back and open the door. I ran to one of the cars we had crashed into that had pulled over behind us. The guy in the car had his phone out, presumably calling the cops. I knocked on his window, screaming that this psycho tried to kidnap me, and he rolled it up all the way. It had been down like a third of the way when I walked up and knocked on it. I couldn't believe it. When I looked back, Psycho was coming towards me. Clearly no one's going to help, so I ran towards the fence. I'm already not in amazing shape and was even weaker because of what had happened, so I literally had to lean on the fence until it bent enough for me to fall over it. Climbing up a chain-link fence was not an option in that moment. Luckily, instead of following me, he ran in the other direction. He just left his car on the side of the freeway. Once I was over the fence, I realized I was on some horse trails that I was familiar with because I had worked at the equestrian center nearby. So I just walked through the miles of trails until I got into the nearest city, which was Burbank, and called the cops from a bowling alley. I never found out what happened to that psycho. The cops never told me after I made the report. But I hope he got in some kind of trouble for, trying to kidnap me.